Security, remove this man from my terminal right now. Karen Whitfield slammed her hand on the armrest of the leather chair where a black man sat quietly, still wearing his marathon medal. She grabbed his boarding pass out of his hand, held it up to the light, and ripped it in half. This is fake. I know a fraud when I see one. People like you don't fly first class. She didn't know that the man she was humiliating owned a $3.2 billion company. She didn't know his private jet was parked 2 hangars away, and she definitely didn't know that in exactly 1 hour, her entire career would be destroyed on live television. Before we begin, if you're new here, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end because this story will stay with you long after it's over. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from, so I can see just how far this story travels. Karen Whitfield didn't wake up that Sunday morning planning to destroy her career. But by the time the sun set over Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, her name would be trending on every social media platform in America. And not for the reasons anyone would ever want. It started with a phone call. Karen was sitting in the break room at 6:45 in the morning, sipping her second cup of black coffee and scrolling through her phone when her supervisor's name flashed across the screen. Karen, I need you on the premium terminal floor by 7. Full staff meeting got canceled and we're short 2 people today. Marathon's got the whole city backed up and we're expecting heavy traffic from the VIP lounge all day. I'm already here, Karen said, standing up and checking her reflection in the microwave door. She straightened her SkyVista Airlines supervisor badge and smoothed down her blazer. 8 years she had worn that badge. 8 years of climbing from gate agent to the woman who ran the most exclusive terminal in one of the busiest airports in the world. Karen took pride in that. Maybe too much pride. She walked out onto the premium terminal floor and immediately started scanning. This was her ritual. Every shift began the same way. She would walk the floor, check every seat, study every face, and decide, within seconds, who belonged and who didn't. It wasn't in the training manual. It wasn't in any SkyVista policy document. It was Karen's personal system, and she believed in it the way some people believe in prayer. You, she said, pointing to a young man in a hoodie near gate C9. General seating is downstairs. This area is for premium passengers only. The young man held up his boarding pass without even looking at her. First class. Karen squinted at it, nodded, and moved on without apologizing. That was Karen, quick to judge, slow to correct. By 9:30 that morning, the premium terminal was filling up with its usual Sunday crowd. Business travelers heading to New York and Chicago, a retired couple flying to Paris, a tech executive arguing loudly on his phone about a product launch. Karen moved through them like a shepherd tending her flock, offering smiles to the passengers who looked like they belonged and cold stares to those she felt didn't. At exactly 10:15, a man walked through the premium terminal entrance. He was tall, 6'2", black, athletic build. He wore gray Nike running shorts with faint white salt stains from dried sweat, a blue moisture-wicking shirt that clung to his frame, white running shoes that looked like they had just survived a war, and around his neck hung a bronze finisher's medal on a slightly frayed ribbon. He carried nothing but a simple black duffel bag. He walked calmly to a leather armchair near gate C12, sat down, pulled out his phone, and began scrolling through messages. He didn't look around nervously. He didn't check to see if anyone was watching him. He sat with the quiet confidence of a man who had been in rooms far more exclusive than this one and had never once been asked to leave. Karen spotted him from 40 feet away, her eyes locked on him the way a hawk locks onto movement in an open field. She stopped mid-stride, her jaw tightened, her fingers curled around the radio clipped to her belt. She didn't reach for it, not yet. Instead, she walked toward him with the kind of deliberate, measured pace that said everything about her intentions before she opened her mouth. "Excuse me, sir." The man looked up from his phone. His eyes were calm, steady. There was no surprise in them, no anxiety, no recognition of threat. Just the quiet patience of someone who had heard that tone before and knew exactly what was coming. "Yes," he said. "This terminal is reserved for first-class passengers. Can I see your boarding pass?" He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a printed boarding pass. He held it out to her without standing up, without rushing, without any of the nervous energy that Karen expected. She took it from his hand and studied it. Flight 562 to New York, Seat 2A, first class, paid in full. The ticket was legitimate. Karen could see that in 3 seconds. But 3 seconds wasn't enough time for her assumptions to catch up with the facts. "Where did you get this?" she asked. The man tilted his head slightly. "I bought it." "You bought a first-class ticket." "That's generally how it works." Karen's nostrils flared. She didn't like his tone. She didn't like his calm. She didn't like the way he sat in that leather chair, as if he owned it, as if the sweat stains on his shorts and the scuffed shoes on his feet didn't matter, as if the rules she had spent 8 years enforcing simply didn't apply to him. "Sir, I'm going to need additional identification. We've had incidents with fraudulent bookings, and I need to verify that this ticket was purchased legitimately." "My name is on the ticket," he said. "Derek Washington. That's my name. That's my seat. That's my flight." "I understand that, sir, but I'm going to need a photo ID and the credit card used to purchase this ticket." Derek Washington looked at Karen Whitfield for a long moment, not with anger, not with defiance, with something closer to recognition, the kind of look a man gives when he realizes he's standing at a crossroads he's stood at many times before, and he already knows which direction the other person is going to choose. He reached into his bag and pulled out his driver's license. He held it up next to the boarding pass so she could compare the names. Karen glanced at the license, glanced at the ticket. The names matched, the photo matched. There was nothing wrong. There was nothing suspicious. There was nothing out of place, except the color of his skin and the clothes on his back. "I'm going to need to run this through our system," Karen said, and she turned and walked away with his boarding pass still in her hand. Derek didn't move. He didn't call after her. He didn't protest. He simply folded his hands in his lap and waited. Because Derek Washington had learned something a long time ago that Karen Whitfield had never been forced to learn. He had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is sit still and let other people reveal exactly who they are. Karen walked to the service desk and picked up the phone, but she didn't call the reservation center. She didn't run his ticket through the system. Instead, she called Brian Caldwell. Brian was airport security, 42 years old, former county sheriff's deputy who had traded his badge for an airport uniform after a disciplinary review he never talked about. He was big, gray-haired, and carried himself with the kind of authority that made people step aside in hallways. He had been working airport security for 6 years, and in those 6 years, he had developed what he believed was an instinct for trouble. His instinct was wrong more often than he would ever admit. "Brian, it's Karen. I need you at gate C12, premium terminal. I've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Suspicious passenger, possible fraudulent ticket. He's not cooperating." Brian was walking before she finished the sentence. "On my way." When Brian arrived at the premium terminal, Karen met him at the entrance and walked him toward Derek's chair. She spoke quickly, her voice low but intense. "Black male, mid-30s, athletic clothes, gym bag. Claims he has a first-class ticket. But look at him, Brian. Does he look like first class to you?" Brian looked across the terminal at Derek Washington, who was sitting exactly where Karen had left him, his hands still folded, his expression unchanged. "No," Brian said. "No, he does not." They approached together, Karen slightly ahead, Brian slightly behind. The formation of authority and enforcement that they had practiced dozens of times on passengers who had wandered into the wrong terminal or tried to use expired boarding passes. But this wasn't one of those situations, and the man sitting in that chair was not who they thought he was. "Sir," Brian said, positioning himself to Derek's right, his hand resting casually on his belt near his radio. "I'm Officer Caldwell, airport security. We need to verify your identity and your authorization to be in this terminal." Derek looked up at Brian. Then he looked at Karen. Then he looked back at Brian. "I showed her my boarding pass," Derek said. "I showed her my driver's license. My name matches my ticket. My ticket is first class. I'm sitting in the first class terminal. What exactly needs to be verified?" "Sir, we have protocols." "What protocols?" Brian didn't answer. Because there were no protocols for this. There was no section in the airport security handbook titled, "What to do when a black man in running shorts sits in a first-class chair." There was no training module, no procedure, no policy. There was only assumption. And assumption was all Brian needed. "I'm going to need you to come with me to the security office so we can run a full background check on your ticket purchase." "No," Derek said. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Excuse me? Brian said. I said no. I'm not leaving this seat. I have a valid ticket, valid identification, and I have broken no law and violated no policy. I'm going to sit here and wait for my flight, just like every other passenger in this terminal. Brian's face hardened. Karen stepped forward. Sir, if you refuse to cooperate with security, we will have you removed from this terminal and possibly arrested for trespassing. Trespassing, Derek repeated. In a terminal, I have a ticket to access. We have the authority to remove any passenger who refuses to comply with security directives. Then remove me, Derek said quietly, but I want you to do it in front of everyone here. I want you to explain to every passenger in this terminal why a man with a valid first-class ticket is being physically removed from a seat he paid for. And I want you to do it while all those phones are recording. It was the first time Karen and Brian looked around, really looked around, and what they saw changed the temperature of the entire confrontation. A young white man with sandy brown hair was sitting near gate C12 with his phone aimed directly at them. He wasn't being subtle about it. His phone was up, his screen angled, and a small red recording light was visible even from 20 feet away. His name was Tyler Brennan, 19 years old, communications major at Georgia State University, and his live stream had just hit 200 viewers. 20 feet to the left, a woman in a Navy business suit had lowered her tablet and was watching the confrontation with undisguised concern. Her name was Dr. Sandra Ellis, 45, cardiologist from New York. She had been listening to every word since Karen's first demand, and her expression said she had already reached her diagnosis. Behind the gate counter, Rosa Delgado had stopped processing upgrades. Her hands were still on her keyboard, but her eyes were fixed on Derek Washington. She had processed his ticket herself that morning. She knew it was legitimate. She knew he had paid full price. And she knew that what she was watching had nothing to do with security and everything to do with the color of his skin and the clothes on his body. Karen didn't notice any of them. She was too focused on winning. Sir, this is your final warning. Either you come with us voluntarily, or we will call airport police and have you arrested. Derek leaned back in his chair. Call them, he said. Karen's face flushed red. Nobody called her bluff. Nobody sat in her terminal and told her no. She had removed passengers before. She had called police before. She had won every confrontation she had ever started in this terminal, because the people she targeted always backed down. They always left. They always chose the path of least resistance, because fighting back felt too exhausting, too humiliating, too dangerous. But Derek Washington was not going to back down, and Karen Whitfield was about to find out why. Brian, call it in, Karen said. Brian unclipped his radio. Dispatch, this is Caldwell at gate C12, Premium Terminal, requesting officer backup for an uncooperative passenger refusing to comply with security screening. The radio crackled. Copy, Caldwell, unit en route. ETA, 4 minutes. Karen crossed her arms and stared down at Derek. You could have just left quietly, she said. Now you're going to leave in handcuffs. Derek met her eyes without flinching. Karen, he said, and the use of her first name startled her, as if a wall she hadn't known existed had just been stepped over. I want you to listen to me very carefully. I have been profiled, harassed, and threatened in your terminal for the crime of sitting in a chair. That is not going to end the way you think it's going to end. Is that a threat? Karen snapped. No, Derek said. It's a promise. Something in his voice made Karen's confidence waver, just for a moment, just a flicker, like a candle flame touched by a draft. But she pushed it down. She buried it beneath 8 years of certainty and authority and the unshakable belief that she could look at a person and know, with one glance, whether they deserved to be in her space. Tyler Brennan's live stream had reached 500 viewers. The comments were starting to pour in. What is happening? Is this for real? Someone tell me which airport this is. This man is a king for staying in that chair. Tyler didn't say a word. He just kept recording. He had learned from his journalism professors that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones told by the people living them, without commentary, without narration, without anyone telling the audience what to think. Dr. Sandra Ellis set down her tablet completely. She had been watching for 11 minutes now, and every passing second made her more uncomfortable with her own silence. She was a woman who made life and death decisions every day in the operating room. She had held human hearts in her hands. But confronting a stranger in an airport terminal about their racist behavior felt somehow more terrifying than any surgery she had ever performed. She stayed seated, but her hands were shaking. Rosa Delgado opened the incident log on her computer and began typing. Time, 10:32 a.m. Terminal Supervisor Karen Whitfield approached passenger Derek Washington, seat 2A, flight 562. Passenger presented valid boarding pass and photo identification. Supervisor questioned legitimacy of ticket without stated cause. Security Officer Brian Caldwell called to scene. Passenger compliant but refused to leave assigned seating area. Supervisor threatened arrest. Rosa's fingers trembled as she typed, but she didn't stop. She knew this log would matter. She didn't know how much yet, but she knew. 4 minutes passed. The radio on Brian's belt crackled to life. Caldwell, this is Officer Reyes. I'm entering Terminal C now. Where's the passenger? Gate C12, leather seating area. Black male, athletic clothes. You can't miss him. Officer Miguel Reyes walked into the premium terminal and took exactly 5 seconds to assess what he was looking at. A calm black man sitting in a chair, an agitated airline supervisor standing over him, a security officer positioned like he was guarding a suspect, and at least 6 passengers with their phones out recording everything. Miguel Reyes had been doing this job for 15 years. He had seen real threats. He had disarmed passengers. He had tackled a man who tried to breach a cockpit door in 2019. He knew what danger looked like. This wasn't it. Officer Caldwell, Reyes said quietly, pulling Brian aside. Talk to me. What has this man actually done? He's refusing to comply with security screening. What screening? Has he gone through TSA? Yes, but the terminal supervisor flagged him as suspicious. Suspicious how? Does he have prohibited items? Has he made threats? Is he intoxicated? No, it's his appearance. He doesn't fit the profile of a premium terminal passenger. Reyes looked at Brian for a long time. Brian, he said, his voice dropping low enough that only the two of them could hear. You need to be very careful about what you say next, because I'm looking at a man sitting quietly in a chair with a valid ticket, and I'm looking at 2 employees who can't give me a single legitimate reason to remove him, and I'm looking at half a dozen phones recording every word we say. Brian's face went pale. Miguel, Karen said, I don't care what Karen said. I care about what I can see. And what I can see is a passenger who has committed no crime, violated no policy, and made no threats. If you remove this man, you'd better have a reason that will hold up in court, because that's exactly where this is headed. Brian looked back at Karen. Karen looked back at Brian. And for the first time since the confrontation began, a crack appeared in their certainty. But Karen Whitfield was not the kind of woman who backed down. She walked past Brian and Reyes directly to Derek's chair and stood over him with her hands on her hips. Sir, I'm giving you one last chance. Leave this terminal now or face the consequences. Derek looked up at her. And then he did something that changed everything. He smiled. Not a mocking smile, not a bitter smile. A genuine, almost warm smile, like a man who has just been dealt exactly the cards he needed. Karen, he said, you've been so focused on what I look like that you never bothered to ask who I am. I don't care who you are. I know, Derek said quietly, and that's going to be the most expensive mistake you've ever made. Karen felt something shift beneath her feet, not physically, but somewhere deep in her gut. In the place where instinct lives, something told her she had walked into something she couldn't walk out of. She ignored it. Brian, she said, not taking her eyes off Derek, remove him. Now. Brian stepped forward. Reyes stepped between them. Nobody is removing anyone, Reyes said firmly. Not without cause. Not on my watch. The three of them stood in a frozen triangle. Brian with his hand on his radio, Karen with fury in her eyes, Reyes with his feet planted and his jaw set. And Derek Washington, still seated, still calm, still smiling. He reached into his duffel bag. Karen flinched. Brian's hand moved to his belt. Reyes shifted his weight. Derek pulled out his phone. He typed a single message, 6 words, and then he set the phone face down on the armrest and folded his hands again. The message read, "Captain Holland, bring her in." Somewhere on the other side of Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, in a private hangar reserved for corporate aircraft, Captain James Holland read the message on his phone, set down his coffee, and walked toward a $65 million Bombardier Global 7500 with the words Washington Global Logistics painted in blue along its fuselage. He climbed into the cockpit, started the engines, and called the tower. Hartsfield Ground, this is November 77 Whiskey Golf requesting taxi to Terminal C, Gate C12, priority passenger pickup. Copy November 77 Whiskey Golf, you're cleared to taxi. Welcome back, Captain Holland. The engines spooled up. The aircraft began to move. And Derek Washington, still sitting in his leather chair, still wearing his marathon medal, still surrounded by people who had decided he didn't belong, checked his watch and calculated exactly how many minutes Karen Whitfield had left before she realized what she had done. The answer was 12. 10:47 a.m. Tyler Brennan's live stream had crossed 800 viewers, and the number was climbing every time he refreshed. He hadn't said a word since he started recording. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. A man in a chair, a woman who wanted him gone, and a line being drawn in real time between authority and abuse. But now, Tyler broke his silence. "For everyone just joining," he whispered into his phone, keeping the camera steady on the confrontation, "we're at Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta. A man in marathon gear is being harassed in the first-class terminal. He has a valid ticket, he has valid ID, and they're still trying to remove him. I've been recording for 22 minutes, and it's getting worse." The comments flooded in faster than he could read. "Don't stop recording. What gate? Share this everywhere. This man is handling this better than I ever could." Tyler's hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. He had covered campus protests and local city council meetings for his student journalism portfolio. But this was different. This was real, raw, and happening 10 feet in front of him. And he knew, with the certainty that only comes at 19, when the world still feels urgent and fixable, that what he was recording mattered. Back at the center of the confrontation, Karen Whitfield was pacing. She had expected Derek Washington to be gone by now. Every other passenger she had ever challenged had either complied or crumbled. They left quietly. They apologized. They accepted her judgment as if it were law. But this man sat in his chair like it was a throne, and every minute he refused to move was another minute her authority bled out onto the marble floor. "Officer Reyes," Karen said sharply, turning to the airport police officer who had refused to remove Derek. "If you're not going to do your job, I'll find someone who will." Reyes didn't flinch. "My job is to enforce the law, not your preferences. This man has broken no law. I'm not touching him." "Then you're useless," Karen snapped. The word landed hard. Reyes's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. 15 years of discipline kept his voice level. "Ma'am, I'd recommend you stop talking. Everything you're saying right now is being recorded by at least 6 people. Karen spun around and for the first time truly registered the phones. They were everywhere. An elderly couple near gate C10 had one phone between them, the husband holding it while the wife whispered directions. A college-aged girl in a window seat had her phone propped against her carry-on like a tripod. A man in a business suit was recording with one hand and typing on his laptop with the other. Karen felt something cold crawl up her spine. But pride is a powerful anesthetic, and hers numbed her completely. She turned back to Derek. "You think those cameras protect you? They don't. When police review the footage, they'll see a man who refused to cooperate with security. That's all anyone will see." Derek looked up at her. "Karen, that's not what they'll see at all, and somewhere inside, you know that." 10:51 a.m. Dr. Sandra Ellis couldn't take it anymore. She had been sitting 20 feet away for almost 30 minutes, watching a man be humiliated for no reason other than the way he looked. She had told herself it wasn't her business. She had told herself someone else would step in. She had told herself all the comfortable lies that good people tell themselves when they don't want to risk their own comfort for someone else's dignity. But watching Derek Washington sit in that chair, with more composure than anyone she had ever seen in an operating room, she felt something break open inside her. Not compassion, shame. Shame for every second she had remained silent. She stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, which surprised her. She had performed open-heart surgery on a 9-year-old last month without her hands shaking. But walking 10 feet across an airport terminal to confront a stranger's racism felt like stepping off a cliff. She did it anyway. "Excuse me," Dr. Ellis said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I'm Dr. Sandra Ellis. I'm a cardiologist. I've been sitting right there for the past 30 minutes watching everything that's happened, and I need to say something." Karen turned toward her, with irritation already burning in her eyes. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It concerns every person in this terminal," Dr. Ellis replied. "This man showed you his ticket. He showed you his ID. You confirmed both were legitimate, and you're still standing over him like he committed a crime. I've been in this terminal for an hour, and you haven't asked a single other passenger for anything. Not one." "Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but you don't understand security procedures. I understand the difference between a procedure and a prejudice. What I'm watching isn't security. It's something else entirely, and we both know exactly what it is." The words hung in the air. Karen's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For 3 full seconds, the most powerful woman in the premium terminal had absolutely nothing to say. Brian Caldwell stepped in to rescue her. "Ma'am, we need all passengers to remain in their seats and allow security to handle this matter." "Handle what matter?" Dr. Ellis shot back. "A man sitting in a chair? That's the emergency? That's what requires multiple security officers?" 10:54 a.m. Tyler Brennan's stream hit 1,400 viewers. A comment appeared that made Tyler's blood run cold. "I work for Sky Vista Corporate. I'm watching this. I'm alerting management right now." Tyler read it out loud for his audience without thinking. The comment section exploded. "Corporate is watching! Someone at Sky Vista is seeing this in real time. Karen is done. She just doesn't know it yet." At gate C12, Rosa Delgado heard the commotion growing and made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She stepped away from her counter, walked around the partition that separated the gate agents from the passenger area, and approached the confrontation directly. She had never defied a supervisor before, not once in 4 years. Rosa had grown up in a household where authority was respected, where you kept your head down and did your work and never made waves. Her parents had immigrated from El Salvador with nothing, and they had built a life through obedience and hard work and silence. But some silences are too expensive to keep. "Karen," Rosa said, and her voice cracked on the first syllable. She swallowed and tried again. "Karen, I processed Mr. Washington's ticket this morning. It's legitimate. He paid $4,200 for that seat. Full price, no points, no upgrade. He bought it 3 weeks ago with a credit card that cleared immediately." Karen whipped around. "Delgado, I told you to stay at your counter. And I'm telling you that you're wrong. I have his booking information right in front of me. Name, confirmation number, payment method, everything. There is nothing fraudulent about this passenger. How do you know he didn't use a stolen card?" "Because the card is in his name, and it cleared 3 weeks ago without a single fraud flag. Karen, please, just stop." The word please seemed to infuriate Karen more than anything else that had been said. She took a step toward Rosa, close enough that Rosa could smell her coffee breath. "You're a gate agent," Karen hissed. "You scan tickets and smile at passengers. That's your job. You don't have the authority or the intelligence to question my security decisions. And if you say one more word, I will personally make sure you never work for this airline again." Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move. "Then fire me," Rosa said quietly, "because I'm not going back to that counter while you do this to an innocent man." 11:02 a.m. Derek Washington watched Rosa Delgado stand up to her supervisor and felt something tighten in his chest. Not for himself, for her. He knew what it cost to stand up when the price was your livelihood. He knew because his father had done it. William Washington had walked away from a steady paycheck in 1987 to buy a delivery truck with borrowed money because he believed he was worth more than what someone else decided to pay him. Rosa Delgado was cut from the same cloth, and Derek made a mental note that whatever happened in the next hour, Rosa Delgado was going to be taken care of. He checked his phone. A text from Captain Holland. Engines running, tower cleared us, taxiing now, ETA Gate C12, approximately 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Derek looked up at Karen, who was still berating Rosa in a voice loud enough to carry across the terminal, and he felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not anger, resolution. He had spent his entire adult life learning how to wait. His father had taught him that. The most dangerous man in any room, William Washington used to say, is the one who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Let them talk. Let them show you who they are. And when they've finished, show them who you are. Derek was almost ready to show them, but not yet. Not quite yet. Officer Caldwell, Derek said, his voice cutting through Karen's tirade against Rosa. Everyone stopped, turned, looked at the man in the chair who had been so quiet for so long that they had almost forgotten he was the center of all of this. I want to ask you one question, Derek said, and I want you to answer it honestly, in front of everyone here. Brian shifted his weight. What's the question? If I were white, wearing these same running shorts, carrying this same gym bag, with this same boarding pass, would you be standing here right now? The terminal went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight and texture. The kind that presses against your ears and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Brian's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Take your time, Derek said. Brian looked at Karen. Karen looked at the floor. Reyes looked at Brian with an expression that said, choose your next words very carefully. That's not relevant, Brian finally managed. It's the only thing that's relevant, Derek replied, and you just answered my question. 11:09 a.m. A man named Richard Townsend stood up from his seat near gate C14. Richard was 52, white, from Chicago, a management consultant who traveled 200 days a year and had seen the inside of more airport terminals than most people see in a lifetime. Richard had been watching the confrontation in silence, telling himself it wasn't his place, telling himself the authorities would sort it out, telling himself all the same lies Dr. Ellis had been telling herself 30 minutes earlier. But when Brian couldn't answer Derek's question, something in Richard snapped. He walked over and stood next to Dr. Ellis, directly facing Karen and Brian. My name is Richard Townsend, he said, pulling out his own phone and beginning to record. I'm a passenger in this terminal, and I want to state for the record that I've witnessed this entire interaction. This gentleman has complied with every request. He's shown identification. He's shown his boarding pass. He has been calm, respectful, and cooperative throughout. And he is still being treated like a suspect. Karen opened her mouth. I'm not finished, Richard said, and something in his tone stopped her cold. I'm wearing khakis and a golf shirt. My carry-on is smaller than his. My ticket is the same class as his. Nobody has asked me for a single thing. Not my ID, not my boarding pass, not my credit card. Nothing. And the only difference between me and this man is something that should never, ever be a factor in how a passenger is treated. Sir, you don't have the full picture, Brian attempted. I have the complete picture, Richard replied, and so does every person recording this right now. 11:14 a.m. Tyler Brennan's stream had hit 2,200 viewers. His phone battery was at 31%. He pulled a portable charger from his backpack without lowering the camera and plugged it in one-handed. He wasn't losing this footage, not now. For everyone watching, Tyler said, his voice barely above a whisper, we just had a doctor, a gate agent, and a businessman all confront the staff, and they still haven't backed down. They still haven't apologized. They still haven't left this man alone. I don't know how this ends, but I know the whole world is going to see it. A new comment appeared on the stream. I'm a reporter at WSB-TV Atlanta. Can the person streaming please DM me immediately? Tyler's eyes went wide. WSB-TV, the biggest news station in Atlanta. He kept recording with one hand and typed a reply with the other. DM sent. 11:17 a.m. Karen Whitfield felt the ground shifting beneath her. The passengers were turning against her. Her own gate agent had publicly defied her. An airport police officer had refused her orders. And the man in the chair, the man she had been so certain didn't belong, was sitting there with the same unshakable calm he'd had since the moment she first approached him. She needed to end this. She needed to win. She needed this man out of her terminal before whatever was happening on social media got any worse. She pulled out her phone and called her direct supervisor, Terminal Operations Director Frank Mercer. Frank, it's Karen. I need authorization to have a passenger forcibly removed from the premium terminal. What's the situation? Uncooperative passenger refusing to comply with security. Possible fraudulent ticket. He's causing a disturbance. Has airport police been called? Officer Reyes is here, but he's refusing to act. Frank paused. Karen, if an officer on scene is refusing to act, that usually means there's no grounds for action. What exactly has this passenger done? He's refusing to leave. Does he have a valid ticket? Karen hesitated 1 second too long. That's what we're trying to verify. Karen, does he have a valid ticket or not? It appears to be valid, but his appearance is inconsistent with stop. Frank's voice went flat. Stop right there. Did you just say you're trying to remove a passenger with a valid ticket because of his appearance? Frank, you don't understand. If you could see Karen, do not remove that passenger. Do not touch that passenger. Do not say another word to that passenger. I'm coming down there right now. Do you understand me? The line went dead. Karen stared at her phone. For the first time in 8 years, her supervisor had shut her down, completely, without discussion. But Karen Whitfield was already too deep. She had spent an hour publicly confronting a man in front of dozens of witnesses and thousands of online viewers. Backing down now meant admitting she was wrong. And Karen Whitfield did not admit she was wrong, ever. She turned back to Derek. Regardless of what anyone says, I know what I see, and I know you don't belong here. Derek looked at her, and this time the smile was gone. In its place was something Karen had never seen directed at her before. Pity. Karen, he said, in about 6 minutes, you're going to find out exactly how wrong you are. And I'm sorry for what it's going to cost you. I genuinely am. The sincerity in his voice was so unexpected that Karen took a physical step backward. She had prepared herself for anger, for threats, for the kind of aggressive response that would justify everything she had done. But pity? Genuine sympathy from the man she had been trying to destroy for the past hour? That terrified her more than anything. 11:21 a.m. Derek's phone buzzed. Captain Holland. 4 minutes out. Tower has us on approach to Terminal C apron. They're clearing ground traffic now. Derek typed back, copy, full protocol. He set his phone down and looked around the terminal. At Tyler Brennan, still recording with the intensity of someone who understood he was documenting history. At Dr. Sandra Ellis, who had found her courage 30 minutes too late, but had found it nonetheless. At Rosa Delgado, who had risked her career for a stranger because it was the right thing to do. At Richard Townsend, who had refused to let his comfort outweigh his conscience. And then he looked at Karen Whitfield and Brian Caldwell, who were standing together near the window, talking in urgent whispers, their body language radiating the frantic energy of people who have just realized they might have made a terrible mistake, but haven't yet grasped how terrible. Derek reached into his duffel bag one final time and pulled out a worn black leather business card holder. He held it in his hands for a moment, running his thumb over the smooth surface, thinking about his father. William Washington had carried this same card holder for 30 years. He had handed out thousands of cards from it, in truck stops and corporate boardrooms and military bases and every space in between. He had carried it because he believed that a man should always be ready to tell the world who he is. Derek opened the holder. removed a single card, and placed it face down on the marble table beside his chair. "When you're ready," Derek said to no one in particular, "pick that up." Karen looked at the card. Brian looked at the card. Reyes looked at the card. Nobody moved. Somewhere beyond the terminal windows, the distant sound of jet engines began to grow. Low at first, just a vibration in the floor. Then louder, closer. The kind of deep, rolling thunder that makes people stop what they're doing and turn toward the windows. Tyler Brennan heard it first. His camera swung toward the windows. "Guys," he whispered to his 2,800 viewers, "do you hear that?" Dr. Ellis heard it next. She looked toward the tarmac, her eyes narrowing. Rosa heard it and felt her pulse quicken without understanding why. Richard Townsend heard it and set down his laptop. Karen Whitfield heard it and felt, for the first time all morning, genuinely afraid. And Derek Washington heard it and closed his eyes. Just for a moment, just long enough to whisper 2 words that no one else could hear. "Thanks, Dad." The engines were getting louder. 11:23 a.m. The sound hit the terminal like a heartbeat, low, deep, growing. The kind of sound that doesn't ask for attention, but takes it anyway. The way thunder takes silence and replaces it with something you feel in your ribs before you hear it in your ears. Every head in the premium terminal turned toward the windows. Tyler Brennan swung his camera toward the tarmac, and his breath caught. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, a white aircraft was rolling toward gate C-12 with the slow, deliberate authority of something that costs more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. The fuselage was immaculate. The engines hummed with power even at taxi speed, and along the side, in blue lettering large enough to read from inside the terminal, were 4 words that changed everything. Washington Global Logistics. Tyler's voice broke when he spoke. "Oh my God. Oh my God, guys, look. Look at the jet. Read the name on the side. Washington. His name is Washington. That's his jet. That is actually his private jet." His live stream hit 3,000 viewers in the next 40 seconds. 3,100. 3,200. The counter climbed like a pulse monitor during a cardiac event. And Tyler Brennan stood there with his phone in his shaking hands, watching a story become a moment, become a movement, in real time. The comments were a flood. "No way. Read the name on the plane. This man owns a billion-dollar company. Karen is finished. I am screaming right now. Someone get this to CNN immediately." Dr. Sandra Ellis walked to the window and stared at the aircraft. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. She turned and looked at Derek Washington, still sitting in his chair, still wearing his marathon medal, still carrying the calm that had never once broken, despite an hour of deliberate humiliation. And she understood. She understood everything. "He knew," she whispered to no one. "He knew the whole time." Rosa Delgado saw the name on the fuselage and felt her knees go weak. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. Washington. The same name on the boarding pass she had processed that morning. The same name she had typed into her incident log. The same name she had defended against her own supervisor. She looked at Derek, and he looked back at her and gave her the smallest nod. A nod that said, "Thank you, and I see you, and you did the right thing, all at once." Rosa's eyes filled with tears for the second time that morning. But these were different tears. Richard Townsend pulled up his phone and started searching. His fingers moved fast. Washington Global Logistics. The results loaded in 2 seconds. $3.2 billion in annual revenue, 18,500 employees, contracts with Amazon, FedEx, UPS, Delta, United, American Airlines, and... He stopped reading, looked up. His face went white. And SkyVista Airlines, a $65 million annual contract with SkyVista Airlines. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. And everyone heard. 11:25 a.m., Karen Whitfield stood at the window and watched the jet roll to a stop at gate C-12 and felt the entire architecture of her world begin to crack. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, superimposed over the aircraft that bore the name of the man she had tried to throw out of her terminal. And for one terrible moment, she saw herself clearly. Not as a supervisor maintaining standards, not as a professional enforcing policy, but as what she was. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to hide it. "That's not," she started. "He can't." "He can," Officer Reyes said from behind her. He hadn't moved from his position, but his voice carried a weight it hadn't carried before. "And based on what I just heard about SkyVista contracts, you didn't just discriminate against a passenger today, Karen. You discriminated against one of your airline's most valuable business partners." Karen spun around. "I didn't know." "That's the point," Reyes said quietly. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." Ryan Caldwell had backed up against the far wall of the terminal like a man trying to melt into the paint. His face was gray. His hands, which had been so confident on his radio and his belt for the past hour, hung limp at his sides. He looked like a man watching a car accident in slow motion, except he was the car. "Brian," Karen hissed, grabbing his arm, "say something. Do something." "What do you want me to do, Karen? His private jet just landed. His name is on a $3 billion company. We spent an hour trying to arrest him for sitting in a chair. We didn't know." "We didn't ask," Brian's voice cracked. For the first time, the big man with the military posture and the authoritative voice sounded like exactly what he was: scared. 11:27 a.m. The jetway extended and connected to the Bombardier's fuselage with a soft mechanical thud. The aircraft door opened, and Captain James Holland stepped into the terminal wearing a uniform so crisp it looked like it had been pressed 30 seconds ago. Holland was 52, lean, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who had spent 20 years in the Air Force before transitioning to private aviation. He had flown Derek Washington across 4 continents and through 2 emergency landings and a hurricane diversion. He had been with Washington Global Logistics for 8 years, and in those 8 years, he had never seen anyone treat his boss with anything less than the highest respect. Until today. Holland's eyes swept the terminal. He saw the phones recording. He saw the crowd gathered. He saw his boss sitting in a leather chair in marathon gear, surrounded by airport staff who looked like they had just been told the building was on fire. And he understood the situation instantly. "Good afternoon, mister." "Washington," Holland said, walking toward Derek with military precision. "Aircraft is fueled and ready. Flight plan to New York is filed. Whenever you're ready, sir." The word, sir, landed on the terminal like a judge's gavel. Karen watched a uniformed pilot address the man she had called a fraud, a trespasser, a criminal, with the kind of deference that doesn't come from politeness, but from genuine respect. And she realized, with a sickness that started in her stomach and radiated outward, that she had not just made a mistake, she had made the mistake. The kind that doesn't get filed away or forgotten or buried under paperwork. The kind that gets broadcast to millions and replayed in courtrooms and taught in corporate training seminars for the next 20 years. Derek stood and shook Holland's hand. "Thank you, Captain. Give me a few minutes." "Take your time, sir. We're not going anywhere." Holland stepped to the side but remained visible, a uniformed reminder of everything Karen and Brian had refused to believe. 11:29 a.m. Derek turned to face the crowd. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every person in the terminal was already hanging on his silence. "My name is Derek Washington," he said. "I am the CEO of Washington Global Logistics. We employ 18,500 people across 47 states. We have contracts with every major airline in America, including a $65 million annual agreement with SkyVista Airlines." He paused. Let it breathe. Let the numbers do their work. "This morning, I ran the Atlanta Marathon in 3 hours and 42 minutes. I ran it in memory of my father, William Washington, who built our company from a single delivery truck and passed away last year. After the race, I came to this terminal with a first-class ticket I paid for in full, and I was told I didn't belong here." Karen made a sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Derek didn't look at her. Not yet. "I wasn't told I didn't belong because my ticket was invalid. It was valid. I wasn't told I didn't belong because I had broken any rule. I hadn't. I was told I didn't belong because of how I looked. Because a black man in running shorts carrying a gym bag didn't match someone's idea of what a first-class passenger should be. Tyler Brennan's stream hit 4,000 viewers. The comments were moving so fast, they were unreadable. But one comment, pinned by a moderator who had taken over managing the chat, read simply, "Every word. Remember every word." Derek reached down and picked up the business card from the marble table where it had been sitting face down for the past 8 minutes. He held it up between 2 fingers. "I put this card on this table and told you to pick it up when you were ready," he said. "Nobody picked it up. Nobody wanted to know who I was. Because you had already decided who I was the moment I walked in." He set the card back down. "The reason I didn't tell you who I was immediately is because it shouldn't matter. My name shouldn't matter. My company shouldn't matter. My net worth shouldn't matter. What should matter is that I had a ticket, I had identification, and I was treated like a criminal anyway." 11:32 a.m. Derek pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. The ringtone filled the silent terminal twice before a voice answered. "Derek, it's Tom Hargrove." The name sent a visible shock through Karen's body. Tom Hargrove was the regional director for Sky Vista Airlines. He was Karen's boss's boss's boss. He was the man who controlled operations across 7 southeastern states. And his voice was coming through Derek Washington's personal phone on speaker, which meant they were not just acquaintances. They were colleagues, partners, equals. "Tom, I'm at Hartsfield-Jackson, gate C12 of your premium terminal. I'm going to put you on speaker because there are some things you need to hear, and there are some people here who need to hear you say them. I'm already aware of the situation, Derek. I've been watching the live stream for the past 20 minutes. I've seen everything." Karen's knees buckled. She reached for the back of a chair and missed. Brian caught her arm, but he was shaking too badly to be much help. They held each other up like 2 people drowning, each pulling the other deeper. "Tom," Derek continued, "your terminal supervisor, Karen Whitfield, approached me approximately 1 hour ago and told me to leave the premium terminal. She said, and I quote, 'This section is for first-class passengers only, not people like you.' She then took my boarding pass, questioned its legitimacy, and called security to have me removed." "I heard it, Derek. I heard every word." "Your security officer, Brian Caldwell, attempted to arrest me for trespassing. He stated that my appearance was inconsistent with typical first-class passenger profiles. He could not identify any policy I had violated because there was no policy to violate." I heard that too. "Your gate agent, Rosa Delgado, attempted to intervene on my behalf. She confirmed my ticket was legitimate and told her supervisor to stop. She was threatened with termination for doing so. I heard that as well. And I want to say something directly to Miss Delgado." Rosa stepped forward, her eyes red, her hands clasped in front of her. "Miss Delgado, my name is Tom Hargrove, and I want you to know that what you did today represents the absolute best of what Sky Vista Airlines should be. You stood up for a passenger when it would have been easier to stay silent. You risked your job to do the right thing. And I promise you, you will not be punished for that. You will be recognized for it." Rosa pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. She nodded even though Hargrove couldn't see her. "Now," Hargrove said, and his voice hardened in a way that made Karen flinch, "I need to address the employees responsible for this situation." 11:35 a.m. Karen Whitfield, Karen's name from the phone speaker, sounded like a sentence being read in a courtroom. She opened her mouth to respond, but only air came out. "Karen, are you there?" Hargrove pressed. "Yes." The word was barely audible. "Karen, I have watched 43 minutes of live video footage documenting your treatment of Mr. Washington. I have heard you question the legitimacy of a valid ticket. I have heard you make comments about a passenger's appearance that violate every principle of the customer service standards you were hired to uphold. And I have heard you threaten a gate agent with termination for defending a passenger's rights. Mr. Hargrove, I was trying to maintain terminal standards. I was doing my job. Your job is to serve passengers, Karen. All passengers. Your job is not to decide who deserves service based on what they're wearing or how they look. Effective immediately, your employment with Sky Vista Airlines is terminated." The word terminated echoed through the terminal like a door slamming shut. Karen's face crumpled. 8 years. 8 years of early mornings and late nights and holidays worked and promotions earned and pride in a badge that now meant nothing. All of it gone in a single word from a phone speaker in front of 100 witnesses and 4,000 live stream viewers. She didn't cry. Not yet. She stood there with her mouth slightly open and her eyes unfocused, like someone who has just been in a car accident and hasn't yet registered the pain. Brian Caldwell. Brian straightened reflexively. Old habits from his law enforcement days. You stand up when someone in authority says your name. Yes, sir. Mr. Caldwell, you are contracted through ATL Security Services, not directly employed by Sky Vista. However, I am contacting your employer immediately to recommend termination of your contract with this airport. You attempted to arrest a passenger who had committed no crime, violated no policy, and posed no threat. You cited appearance as grounds for suspicion. That is not security. That is profiling, and it has no place in any facility that bears Sky Vista's name. Brian said nothing. His jaw worked back and forth like he was chewing on words he couldn't swallow. Mr. Hargrove, Brian finally said, with all due respect, we had a passenger who what? Who sat in a chair? Who wore running shorts? Who was black? Hargrove's voice cut like a blade. Tell me which of those things constitutes a security threat, Mr. Caldwell. I'm genuinely asking, because I've reviewed every second of footage, and I cannot find a single moment where Mr. Washington did anything except exercise his right to sit in a seat he paid for. Brian had no answer. He stood there with his mouth working and his eyes darting and his hands opening and closing at his sides, and he had no answer. Because there was no answer. There had never been an answer. There had only been an assumption dressed up as authority, and now that assumption had been stripped naked in front of the world. 11:39 a.m. Tyler Brennan's stream hit 5,200 viewers. A new comment appeared. This is WSB-TV Atlanta. We have a crew en route to the airport. Can anyone on site provide additional footage? 3 more news outlets posted similar requests within 30 seconds. Tyler felt dizzy. 22 minutes ago, he had been a college sophomore editing video content. Now he was the primary source for what was rapidly becoming a national news story. His phone was at 18% battery despite the portable charger. His hands were cramping from holding the camera steady for over an hour, and he had never felt more awake in his entire life. For everyone watching, Tyler said, his voice stronger now, steadier, as if the weight of the audience had forged something in him that hadn't been there before. We just witnessed 2 employees terminated in real time for discriminating against a passenger. The regional director of Sky Vista Airlines did it live, on speakerphone, in front of everyone. This is unprecedented. This is accountability happening in real time. And it happened because people refused to be silent. Derek picked up his phone from speaker. Tom, I appreciate the swift action, but I want to be clear that terminating 2 employees is not the end of this conversation. It's the beginning. I understand, Derek, and I want you to know that Sky Vista is prepared to take whatever steps necessary to address this situation fully, including policy review, staff retraining, and any personal remedies you deem appropriate. We'll discuss that through proper channels, but right now, I want to say something to the people in this terminal. Of course. Derek ended the call and slid his phone into his pocket. 11:41 a.m. The premium terminal was packed. Passengers from adjacent gates had drifted over, drawn by the commotion and the phones and the private jet visible through the windows. Ground crew members were watching through the glass. 2 Sky Vista gate agents from neighboring gates had abandoned their counters to witness what was happening. Derek stood in the center of it all, still wearing his marathon shorts, still wearing his finisher's medal, still carrying nothing but a black duffel bag. And he spoke. I want to be honest with everyone here about something, he said. Part of me wanted to tell them who I was the moment this started. Part of me wanted to pull out my phone and call my assistant and end this in 30 seconds. I have the resources to do that. I have the connections to do that. I have the kind of power that makes problems disappear before they become problems. He paused, looked down at the medal around his neck. But I didn't do that. And the reason I didn't do that is because most people who face what I face today don't have a private jet parked in a hangar. Most people who get told they don't belong somewhere don't have a CEO title or a billion-dollar company. Most people who are profiled and harassed and humiliated in spaces they have every right to occupy have nothing but their dignity and their voice. And I wanted to know what it felt like to stand on that ground, alone. Because that's the ground my father stood on for 40 years before his company was worth anything. That's the ground most people stand on every single day. Dr. Sandra Ellis was crying. She didn't wipe her eyes. She let the tears fall because they felt earned, like something she owed and was finally paying. Richard Townsend had lowered his phone. He wasn't recording anymore. He was just listening. Really listening. The way people listen when they realize they're hearing something they'll carry for the rest of their lives. Rosa Delgado stood with her back straight and her chin up and her Sky Vista badge gleaming under the terminal lights. And she felt, for the first time in 4 years, genuinely proud to be standing where she was standing. Derek continued, "I'm going to board my jet now. I'm going to fly to New York. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to sit down with my legal team and my board, and we're going to decide how to respond to what happened here today. But before I go, I want to say something to the people who spoke up." He looked at Tyler Brennan. "Young man, you started recording when nobody asked you to. You documented injustice because you believed it mattered. That's not just journalism. That's courage." Tyler's eyes were burning. He blinked hard and kept the camera up. Derek looked at Dr. Ellis. "Doctor, you left your comfortable seat to stand next to a stranger because your conscience wouldn't let you sit still. That's what healing looks like outside of a hospital." Dr. Ellis nodded. She couldn't speak. He looked at Richard Townsend. "Sir, you put your name on the record when it would have been easier to stay anonymous. That's integrity." Richard cleared his throat and said nothing because nothing needed to be said. And then Derek looked at Rosa Delgado, and something in his expression shifted, softened, became personal in a way it hadn't been with the others. "Miss Delgado, you told your supervisor to stop. She threatened your job, and you said, 'Then fire me.' You chose a stranger's dignity over your own security. My father would have hired you on the spot." Rosa couldn't hold it anymore. A sob escaped her, and she covered her face with both hands, and her shoulders shook, and she didn't care who was watching, because sometimes being seen crying is braver than being seen standing. 11:44 a.m. Derek picked up his duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder. The marathon medal swung against his chest. His running shoes squeaked softly on the marble floor as he walked toward the jetway, where Captain Holland stood waiting. He passed Karen Whitfield on the way. Karen was sitting in one of the leather chairs she had spent 8 years protecting from people she deemed unworthy. Her badge was still clipped to her blazer, but it meant nothing now. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. She looked smaller than she had an hour ago, not just defeated, diminished, as if the authority she had wrapped around herself for 8 years had been the only thing holding her together, and without it, she was just a woman sitting in a chair she no longer had any right to occupy. Derek stopped beside her. Karen looked up. Her eyes were red, but dry. She had been holding her tears through sheer force of will, refusing to give the cameras the satisfaction. "I didn't know who you were," she said. Her voice was flat, hollow. Derek looked at her for a long moment. "That's exactly the problem, Karen. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them like a human being." He held her gaze for one more second, then he turned and walked toward his jet. Brian Caldwell was standing near the window, alone, his radio silent, his authority stripped. He watched Derek walk past without looking at him. He opened his mouth to say something, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Washington." Derek stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," Brian said. Derek stood still for 3 seconds. Then he said, without turning, "Tell that to the next person you see in running shorts who doesn't look like they belong, because they'll need to hear it more than I do." He walked through the jetway. Captain Holland followed. The aircraft door closed. 11:47 a.m. The Bombardier's engines spooled up. The jetway retracted. Ground crew removed the chocks, and slowly, with the kind of grace that only $55 million of engineering can produce, the aircraft began to push back from gate C-12. Tyler Brennan pressed his phone against the window and watched the jet taxi toward the runway. His stream was at 6,000 viewers. Tears were streaming down his face, and he didn't care. He was 19 years old, and he had just witnessed something that would shape every story he would ever tell for the rest of his career. "He's gone," Tyler said into his camera. "He got on his jet, and he's gone. And I need everyone watching to understand something. He didn't do this for revenge. He didn't do this to humiliate anyone. He did this so that the next person who walks into a terminal wearing running shorts and carrying a gym bag might be treated like a human being instead of a suspect." The jet reached the runway, paused. Then the engines roared and the Bombardier surged forward and lifted into the Georgia sky, climbing fast, catching sunlight on its white fuselage until it was nothing but a bright point disappearing into the blue. In the terminal below, nobody moved for a very long time. 11:52 a.m. The jet was gone, but the silence it left behind was louder than its engines. Nobody in the premium terminal moved. Nobody spoke. The space that had hummed with confrontation for over an hour was now filled with the kind of quiet that follows a detonation, the ringing stillness that tells you the explosion is over, but the damage is just beginning. Tyler Brennan was the first to speak. He lowered his phone from the window, but kept the camera rolling, turning it back toward the terminal, where passengers stood frozen in various states of shock, anger, and awakening. His stream had stabilized at 6,400 viewers, and the comment section had become something he had never seen before. Not just outrage, not just support, conversation. Real, raw, human conversation about race and assumptions and the cost of silence. "I need to sit down," Tyler said into his camera, and his voice sounded older than it had 2 hours ago. He walked to an empty chair and sat, keeping the phone aimed at the terminal. "For everyone who just joined, I'm going to stay here and keep streaming because this story isn't over. The man left, but the people who did this to him are still here. And I think what happens next matters just as much as what already happened." He was right, because what happened next started with Karen Whitfield's phone ringing, 11:54 a.m. Karen was still sitting in the leather chair where Derek's words had left her. She hadn't moved. Her Sky Vista badge was still clipped to her blazer, and she kept touching it, running her thumb over the embossed logo the way a person touches a wound to confirm it's real. When her phone rang, she pulled it from her pocket and stared at the screen like she had forgotten how phones worked. The caller ID read, "Mom." Karen answered, "Hello?" "Karen, honey, are you okay? Your brother just called me. He said there's a video on Facebook of you at the airport, and he said I need to call you right now." Karen closed her eyes. "Mom." "He said you're in some kind of trouble. He said there's thousands of people watching. Karen, what happened?" "I made a mistake, Mom." "What kind of mistake?" Karen opened her mouth to explain and realized she couldn't. She couldn't say it out loud. She couldn't compress the last 90 minutes into a sentence that her mother would understand, because putting it into words would mean hearing it in her own voice, and she wasn't ready for that. She might never be ready for that. "I have to go," Karen said. "I'll call you later." She hung up before her mother could respond. And then she sat there, holding her dead phone in both hands, staring at the Sky Vista logo on the lock screen, knowing that by tonight, her name would be attached to that logo in every headline in America, and not in the way she had spent 8 years working toward. 11:57 a.m. Brian Caldwell's phone was ringing too, his boss, Marcus Webb, director of ATL Security Services. Brian let it ring 4 times before answering because he already knew what the call was about, and answering it meant accepting that this was really happening. "Caldwell." "Brian, it's Marcus. I just got off the phone with Sky Vista's regional director. They're pulling our contract for the premium terminal effective immediately. They cited your conduct as the primary reason." Brian pressed his free hand against his forehead. "Marcus, I was doing my job." "Your job is threat assessment and passenger safety, Brian, not dress code enforcement. I've watched the footage. All of it. You couldn't identify a single policy violation. You couldn't articulate a single security concern beyond appearance. And you attempted to arrest a man for sitting in a chair. He was uncooperative. He was cooperative from the first second. He showed his ticket. He showed his ID. He answered every question. The only thing he refused to do was leave a seat he had every right to be in. That's not uncooperative, Brian. That's a man exercising his rights while you tried to take them away. Brian's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. So what happens now? You're suspended pending a full review. Turn in your badge and radio to the shift supervisor before you leave the airport. And Brian, don't talk to any reporters. Don't post anything on social media. Don't call Karen Whitfield. The legal exposure on this is significant, and anything you say from this point forward can and will be used against us. The line went dead. Brian stood alone near the window where 90 minutes ago he had walked in with authority and certainty and the unshakable confidence that he could look at a man and know whether he belonged. He unclipped his radio from his belt, unclipped his badge from his shirt, held them both in his hands and felt their weight, the physical weight of identity and purpose being taken away, and understood for the first time what Derek Washington must have felt when Karen ripped his boarding pass in half. Except Derek hadn't deserved it. 12:03 p.m. Officer Miguel Reyes was sitting at the security station writing his incident report. He wrote carefully, precisely, with the attention to detail that 15 years of law enforcement had drilled into him. Every timestamp, every quote, every action taken, and every action refused. He knew this report would be read by airport administrators, airline executives, federal reviewers, civil rights attorneys, and possibly a judge. And he knew that the only thing protecting him from being swept up in the consequences was the fact that he had done his job correctly when others had not. His partner, Officer Davis, walked up and leaned against the desk. Reyes, everyone's talking about the video. The whole department is watching it. You're in it. I know I'm in it. You look good, man. You're the only one who comes out of this looking like an actual professional. I don't feel good about it, Reyes said, still writing. I should have shut it down faster. I should have pulled rank on Caldwell the second I arrived and ended the whole thing. You didn't have the authority to override the terminal supervisor. I had the authority to protect a passenger from unlawful detention. That's exactly what was happening, and I let it go on too long because I was trying to be diplomatic. Reyes set his pen down and looked at Davis. 3 more minutes of diplomacy and Brian would have put his hands on that man. And then we wouldn't be talking about a viral video. We'd be talking about a lawsuit and criminal charges and national news coverage that makes Ferguson look like a footnote. Davis had no response to that. 12:11 p.m. 30,000 feet above the Appalachian Mountains, Derek Washington sat in the cabin of his Bombardier and stared at his phone. Lisa Park, his executive assistant, had been texting him nonstop since takeoff. The messages formed a timeline of a story exploding in real time. 12:01 p.m. Tyler Brennan's stream archived, already at 340,000 views on replay, climbing fast. 12:04 p.m. WSB-TV Atlanta aired the first segment, lead story, 3-minute package with live stream footage. Anchor called it a stunning display of racial profiling caught on camera. 12:06 p.m. CNN picked it up, running it as breaking news banner. Producer called requesting exclusive interview. 12:08 p.m. AP Wire story published. Headline, Billion-dollar CEO profiled at Atlanta Airport. Private jet lands to reveal identity. Every major outlet pulling from Tyler Brennan's footage. 12:11 p.m. Your name is trending #1 on Twitter. Hashtag Derek Washington. Hashtag dignity, not dress code. Hashtag boycott Sky Vista. Derek read each message without responding. He set his phone face down on the table and looked out the window at the clouds below. His marathon medal was still around his neck. He hadn't taken it off. He wasn't going to take it off until he was home, because it wasn't really about the race. It was about his father. And his father had been with him in that terminal today, in the steadiness of his hands and the patience of his silence, and the belief, deep as bone, that a man's worth is not determined by the clothes on his back. His phone buzzed again. Not Lisa this time, a number he didn't recognize. He let it go to voicemail. Then another number. Then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. He picked up the phone and called Lisa. Lisa, how many interview requests so far? 47, and counting. 60 Minutes called twice. GMA wants you tomorrow morning. The Today Show offered to send a crew to your home tonight. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, All three want exclusives, and Oprah's team called. Derek exhaled slowly. Oprah's team. Yes, sir. Also, Jennifer Walsh from the law firm called. She's already preparing a federal civil rights complaint against Sky Vista Airlines and ATL Security Services. She says the live stream footage alone is worth a multi-million-dollar settlement, but she wants to discuss whether you want to pursue punitive damages or systemic reform or both. Both, Derek said without hesitation, but not for me, for the people who face this every day without a private jet. Understood. And sir, one more thing. What? Rosa Delgado, the gate agent who stood up for you. She's been placed on administrative leave by the interim terminal supervisor, pending investigation. Derek's hand tightened around the phone. She's been what? Administrative leave, standard procedure when an employee is involved in a termination incident. It's technically not punishment, but she's off the schedule and not getting paid until the review is complete. Get Tom Hargrove on the phone, right now. Yes, sir. 3 minutes later, Derek was on the phone with Sky Vista's regional director for the second time that day. Tom, Rosa Delgado has been placed on administrative leave. That's standard protocol for anyone involved in. Tom, this woman risked her career to defend me when your supervisor was discriminating against me. She was the only Sky Vista employee in that terminal who did the right thing. And your company's response is to take her off the schedule and stop paying her? Silence on the other end. Fix it, Derek said. Today, she goes back on the payroll immediately with full back pay, and I want her considered for a supervisory position to replace the woman who just got fired. If Sky Vista can't figure out how to reward integrity, then we need to revisit whether our $65 million is going to the right airline. Derek, I'll handle it personally. She'll be reinstated by end of day. With a promotion. Another pause. I'll see what I can do. Tom, with a promotion. Yes, with a promotion. You have my word. Derek ended the call and leaned back in his seat. He closed his eyes and thought about Rosa Delgado standing between him and Karen Whitfield, with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice saying, "Then fire me." And he thought about his father, who had once told him that the true measure of a company isn't its revenue or its stock price, but how it treats the people who do the right thing when doing the right thing is the hardest option available. 12:22 p.m. On the ground in Atlanta, the premium terminal had cleared of most passengers, but the aftermath was still reverberating through the airport like aftershocks from an earthquake. Tyler Brennan had finally ended his live stream at 12:15, but not before giving his audience one final update. The video has been shared over 100,000 times in the last hour. News crews are arriving at the airport. I've been contacted by 7 media outlets for interviews. I'm a 19-year-old communications major from Georgia State, and I have no idea what happens next. But I know that what we witnessed today mattered. Stay tuned, and thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. He closed the stream and sat in his chair for a full minute, staring at his phone. His follower count had gone from 1,200 to 94,000. His inbox had 400 unread messages. His hands were still shaking. His phone rang. It was his mother. "Tyler James Brennan, why is your face on CNN right now?" "Mom, I can explain. You're standing in an airport filming something, and Anderson Cooper just said your name on television. Your grandmother called me. She doesn't even know how to work her TV remote, but she found CNN, and she's watching you right now." Tyler laughed. It came out half laugh, half sob, the kind of sound that happens when adrenaline and exhaustion collide. "Mom, I recorded something important. I'll tell you everything when I get home." "Are you safe?" "I'm safe. I'm at the airport. My flight board's in an hour." "Tyler, I'm proud of you. Whatever you did, if Anderson Cooper knows your name, I'm proud of you." Tyler hung up and pressed his phone against his forehead and breathed. Just breathed. 12:28 p.m. Dr. Sandra Ellis had not moved from the premium terminal. Her flight to New York didn't board for another 40 minutes, and she couldn't have moved anyway because her legs felt like they were filled with sand. She sat in her chair with her tablet in her lap, but she wasn't reading patient files. She was replaying the last 2 hours in her mind, frame by frame, cataloging every moment she had stayed silent and measuring it against the moment she finally stood up. 30 minutes. She had waited 30 minutes. 30 minutes while a man was being humiliated 10 feet in front of her. 30 minutes while her conscience screamed and her comfort whispered. And she chose comfort because comfort was easier. Because standing up meant drawing attention. Because intervening meant risking confrontation. Because saying something meant admitting that what she was watching was real and ugly and happening right now, not on a screen, not in a history book, not in someone else's story, but in front of her face. She had been proud of herself when she finally spoke up, but sitting here now in the aftermath, she wasn't proud at all. She was ashamed of the 30 minutes. The 30 minutes would haunt her. Her phone buzzed, a text from her husband, David. "Sandy, are you the doctor in the airport video? My partner just showed me. Is that you?" She typed back, "Yes, that's me. You were incredible." She stared at his response and felt something twist in her chest. "I was 30 minutes too late," she typed. Then deleted it. Typed, "Thank you," instead. Sent it. Put her phone away. 12:35 p.m. Rosa Delgado was sitting in the employee break room with her uniform still on and her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She had been placed on administrative leave 40 minutes ago by the interim terminal supervisor, a man named Gerald Foster, who had arrived 20 minutes after Karen's termination and immediately began following standard protocol without asking a single question about what had actually happened. Rosa hadn't argued. She hadn't cried. She had simply nodded, turned in her gate access card, and walked to the break room, where she sat alone with the coffee and the silence and the knowledge that she had done the right thing and been punished for it. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Miss Delgado? This is Tom Hargrove, Regional Director for Sky Vista Airlines. We spoke earlier on Mr. Washington's phone." Rosa's heart slammed against her ribs. "Yes, sir, I remember." "Miss Delgado, I'm calling to inform you that your administrative leave has been rescinded effective immediately. You are to report for your next scheduled shift as normal." Rosa closed her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I'm not finished. Effective Monday, you're being promoted to Customer Service Manager for the Premium Terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson. You'll be responsible for overseeing all passenger-facing operations in the terminal where today's incident occurred. Your salary will reflect the new position." Rosa's coffee cup slipped from her fingers and hit the table. She barely noticed. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "You're being promoted, Miss Delgado. Mr. Washington personally recommended you for the position, and after reviewing your employee file and your conduct today, I agree with his assessment. You demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and integrity that we need in that role." Rosa pressed her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders began to shake. The tears she had been holding since Karen threatened to fire her, the tears she had fought through Derek's speech, the tears she had swallowed during 40 minutes of sitting alone in a break room, wondering if doing the right thing had cost her everything, all came at once. "Miss Delgado, are you still there?" "Yes," she managed. "Yes, I'm here. I accept. Thank you. Thank you so much." "No, Miss Delgado, thank you for being the person this company should have been today." The call ended. Rosa sat in the break room alone, crying freely, holding her phone against her chest like something precious. And then she did something she hadn't done since she was a little girl, sitting in her mother's kitchen in San Salvador. She prayed. Not for herself, for Derek Washington, for the man in the running shorts who had shown her that standing up doesn't just cost you something. Sometimes, if you're brave enough, and the world is paying attention, standing up gives you everything. 12:44 p.m. In a house in Marietta, Georgia, Karen Whitfield's brother Craig was sitting in front of his computer, watching Tyler Brennan's archived live stream for the third time. His wife stood behind him with her hand over her mouth. "That's Karen," Craig said quietly. "That's my sister." "I know." "She's going to be on every news channel in America by tonight." "I know, Craig. How do I help her? What do I even say to her?" His wife put her hand on his shoulder. "You tell her you love her, and then you tell her the truth, because somebody needs to." Craig picked up his phone and called his sister. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. A third time, voicemail. He typed a text. "Karen, I love you. Call me when you're ready. He didn't know that Karen was still sitting in the premium terminal in the same leather chair with her phone in her hand, watching her brother's name flash on the screen and being unable to answer because answering meant talking, and talking meant explaining, and explaining meant facing the truth that she had spent 8 years building something and destroyed it in 60 minutes because she looked at a black man in running shorts and decided he didn't belong in her space. Her space. That was the problem. She had started thinking of it as her space, her terminal, her chairs, her standards. And somewhere in those 8 years of ownership, she had stopped seeing passengers as people and started seeing them as things that either fit her picture or didn't. Derek Washington hadn't fit her picture, and she had tried to erase him. Karen stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff. Her back ached. She felt 100 years old. She unclipped her Sky Vista badge from her blazer and held it in her palm, studying the logo one last time. Then she set it on the leather chair where Derek Washington had been sitting, turned, and walked toward the terminal exit. She didn't look back. 12:51 p.m. Across America, the story was spreading like wildfire, jumping from tree to tree, each share and repost carrying it further and faster than any single news broadcast could have managed. In a barbershop in Chicago, 6 men watched the replay on a phone propped against a mirror. Nobody spoke until it was over. Then the barber set down his clippers and said, "That's every airport. That's every hotel. That's every restaurant where a brother walks in wearing the wrong clothes and somebody decides he doesn't belong." In a law school classroom at Howard University, a professor paused her lecture to show the video. "This," she told her students, "is why civil rights law still matters. This is not history. This is today." In a corporate boardroom in Seattle, a Fortune 500 CEO watched the footage and immediately called an emergency meeting with his diversity and inclusion team. "If this can happen to a man worth $800 million, he told them, "what's happening to people who can't fight back?" In a retirement home in Jacksonville, Florida, a 78-year-old man named Robert Chen watched Tyler Brennan stream on his grandson's iPad and wept quietly. He had been William Washington's business partner for 22 years. He had watched William build his company from nothing. He had watched William face discrimination in boardrooms and loading docks and every space in between. And he had watched William's son handle it with the same dignity and grace that his father had carried every single day of his life. Robert picked up his phone and typed a message to Derek. "Your father would have been incredibly proud of how you handled yourself today. You turned a moment of humiliation into a lesson about dignity that millions of people will never forget. That's exactly the kind of leadership William raised you to demonstrate." He sent it and set the phone down and looked out his window at the Florida sky, thinking about his old friend, thinking about delivery trucks and borrowed money, and the kind of courage that builds empires not out of anger, but out of the unshakable belief that every human being deserves to be treated with respect. 1:03 p.m. The Bombardier Global 7500 began its descent into New York. Derek Washington felt the shift in cabin pressure and opened his eyes. He had not been sleeping. He had been sitting with his eyes closed, his father's medal around his neck, processing the weight of what had happened and what was still coming. His phone showed 87 new messages, 14 missed calls. His name was trending in 12 countries. He picked up the phone and read Robert Chen's text first, read it twice, read it a third time. And then Derek Washington, the CEO of a $3.2 billion company, the man who had sat motionless through an hour of deliberate humiliation without shedding a single tear, pressed his phone against his chest and cried. Not for himself. Not for the confrontation, not for the victory or the vindication or the viral video that was reshaping national conversations in real time. He cried for his father, for the man who had never owned a private jet, who had never worn a suit that cost more than $50, who had driven that first delivery truck in work boots and a flannel shirt and been told 1,000 times in 1,000 ways that he didn't belong in spaces he had every right to occupy. William Washington had never had a Tyler Brennan recording his moments of humiliation. He had never had a Dr. Sandra Ellis standing up for him. He had never had a Rosa Delgado risking her career to defend his dignity. He had faced it alone, quietly, with nothing but his work ethic and his character and his absolute refusal to let anyone else define his worth. And he had built an empire anyway. Derek wiped his eyes, straightened in his seat, and looked out the window as New York appeared below. Somewhere down there, his legal team was preparing documents. His communications team was drafting statements. His board was scheduling emergency meetings. The machinery of accountability was spinning up, and it would not stop until the story of what happened at Gate C-12 had been transformed from a viral moment into lasting change. But that was tomorrow's work. Today, Derek reached up and held the marathon medal between his fingers, feeling the weight of 26.2 miles and 67 years of Washington family history, and one quiet Sunday morning in Atlanta, when a man in running shorts refused to give up his chair. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "We finished the race." 3 days later, Derek Washington sat in the conference room of Walsh & Associates, one of the most respected civil rights law firms in the country, and listened to his attorney lay out the scope of what had happened since he walked out of that terminal. Jennifer Walsh was 51, sharp-featured, silver-tongued, and had spent 23 years turning moments of injustice into instruments of systemic change. She had argued before the Supreme Court twice. She had won settlements that rewrote corporate policies at 3 Fortune 100 companies. And she had never, in her entire career, seen a case with evidence this clear, this public, and this devastating. Derek, as of this morning, Tyler Brennan's live stream has been viewed 47 million times across all platforms. It's been featured on every major news network in the country and picked up internationally by BBC, Al Jazeera, and Reuters. Your name has been mentioned in 3 separate congressional statements about airport security reform. And I have, sitting on my desk right now, 1,412 individual reports from passengers at airports across America who say they experienced similar discrimination and want to share their stories. Derek leaned forward. 1,400 in 3 days. And that number is climbing by the hour. What happened to you at Gate C-12 didn't just expose one incident, Derek. It cracked open a dam. People who have been carrying these experiences in silence for years are suddenly talking about them because they saw a man refuse to be silent and they realized they don't have to be silent either. Derek sat with that number for a moment. 1,400 people. 1,400 stories of being told they didn't belong, being questioned, being profiled, being made to feel like intruders in spaces they had paid to enter. And those were just the ones who had come forward. "What are our options?" he asked. Jennifer opened a folder. Option 1, we file a federal civil rights lawsuit against SkyVista Airlines and ATL Security Services. The evidence is overwhelming. The live stream footage alone would make any jury in America award substantial damages. We're talking 8 figures minimum, possibly 9. And the money goes where? To you, as compensatory and punitive damages. Derek shook his head. "I don't need their money, Jennifer. I have money. What I need is change. Give me option 2. Jennifer smiled. She had been hoping he would say that. Option 2. We negotiate a consent decree with SkyVista Airlines that requires comprehensive reform of their customer service and security protocols, mandatory bias training for every employee, independent oversight boards at every major hub, a passenger advocacy office with real authority to investigate complaints, and a $10 million fund paid for by SkyVista to support anti-discrimination initiatives at airports nationwide. And if they refuse, then we go back to option 1 and take them for everything the law allows. But they won't refuse. Their stock dropped 4% the day after the incident. Their CEO called Tom Hargrove 3 times yesterday. They're bleeding passengers, and they know the only way to stop the bleeding is to get ahead of the story. Derek looked at Jennifer. Add something. What? The consent decree. Add a requirement that SkyVista name their premium terminal reform program after my father. The William Washington Dignity Initiative. He built the company that pays them $65 million a year. His name should mean something in their terminals. Jennifer wrote it down. Done. Anything else? Rosa Delgado, I want language in the agreement that protects any employee who intervenes on behalf of a passenger being mistreated. Whistleblower protection, no retaliation, no administrative leave, no quiet transfers to smaller airports. If someone does what Rosa did, they get protected, not punished. I'll draft it today. Derek stood and walked to the window. He could see the Atlanta skyline from Jennifer's office, the city where his father had started with nothing and built something that employed 18,500 families. The city where, 3 days ago, he had been told he didn't belong. Jennifer, one more thing. Tyler Brennan, the kid who recorded the stream, he's a sophomore at Georgia State, communications major. He documented everything at personal risk, and his footage is the foundation of every legal action we're going to take. What about him? I want to offer him an internship, paid, at Washington Global Logistics, Media and Communications Division. And I want to set up a scholarship fund in his name at Georgia State for students studying journalism. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You want to set up a scholarship in the name of a 19-year-old? I want to send a message that documenting injustice matters, that the person holding the camera is just as important as the person in the chair. That kid changed the trajectory of this entire situation by pressing record. The least I can do is make sure he can finish school without worrying about tuition. Jennifer nodded slowly. You're not just building a legal case, are you? You're building a movement. Derek turned from the window. My father built a company. I'm going to build something bigger. 1 week after the incident, Tyler Brennan was sitting in his dorm room at Georgia State when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail because his phone had been ringing non-stop for 7 days, and he was exhausted from interviews and media requests and professors who wanted to use his footage in their lectures. But something made him answer. Tyler, this is Lisa Park, executive assistant to Derek Washington. Tyler nearly dropped his phone. Yes, hi, yes, this is Tyler. Mr. Washington would like to speak with you. Are you available? Right now? Right now. There was a click, and then the voice Tyler had heard in the terminal, the voice that had stayed calm through an hour of humiliation, came through his phone. Tyler, this is Derek Washington. I want to thank you for what you did at the airport. Tyler's hands were shaking. Mr. Washington, I just pressed record. You're the one who did something. You did more than press record, Tyler. You bore witness. Do you understand what that means? There were 100 people in that terminal. Most of them watched. Some of them spoke up. But you made sure the world could see what was happening. You made sure it couldn't be denied, or minimized, or buried in an incident report. That matters more than you know. Tyler swallowed hard. It felt like the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. And I want to make sure it leads somewhere good for you. I'm offering you a paid internship at Washington Global Logistics, Media and Communications. You'll work with our team on a project that uses storytelling to document and fight discrimination. And I'm establishing a scholarship at Georgia State in your name for students studying journalism. Tyler sat down on the edge of his bed because his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. Mr. Washington, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Yes, absolutely yes. Good. Lisa will send you the details. And Tyler, keep that camera ready. The world needs more people who press record when it matters. The call ended. Tyler sat in his dorm room, holding his phone, staring at the wall, trying to process the fact that the most significant moment of his life had started because he looked up from his laptop at the right time and decided that what he was seeing deserved to be seen by everyone. He called his mother. She picked up on the first ring. Mom, you're not going to believe this. After last week, I'll believe anything. Derek Washington just offered me an internship, and he's setting up a scholarship in my name. His mother was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she said, Tyler James Brennan, you make your mama so proud I could burst. And then she started crying, and Tyler started crying, and they sat on the phone together crying and laughing, because sometimes the best moments in life are the ones that break you open and fill you up at the same time. 2 weeks after the incident, Dr. Sandra Ellis was back in her office in New York reviewing patient charts before her afternoon surgeries when her assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Ellis, there's a letter for you, hand-delivered, from someone named Derek Washington. Sandra set down her pen. She hadn't spoken to Derek since the terminal. She hadn't reached out because she still carried the shame of those 30 silent minutes like a stone in her chest, and she wasn't sure she deserved to be in contact with the man she had waited too long to defend. She opened the letter. It was handwritten. The penmanship was precise and deliberate, the kind of handwriting that suggested someone who had been taught that words on paper carry weight. Dr. Ellis, I want you to know that your decision to stand up in that terminal mattered more than you might realize. You could have remained silent. Many people did. But you chose to use your voice, your credentials, and your presence to challenge what was happening. I know it took 30 minutes. I know that weighs on you. But here's what I've learned from running marathons. It doesn't matter when you start running. It matters that you start. And once you started, you didn't stop. Thank you for finishing the race, Derek Washington. Sandra read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in the top drawer of her desk, and sat quietly for a moment before pulling up a contact she had been avoiding for 2 weeks. She called the hospital's Diversity and Inclusion Committee and volunteered to lead their new initiative on bystander intervention training. When the committee chair asked her why, Sandra said, "Because I waited 30 minutes once, and I never want to wait that long again." 1 month after the incident, SkyVista Airlines signed the consent decree. Every demand was met: mandatory bias training, independent oversight, passenger advocacy offices, whistleblower protection. And at the center of it all, the William Washington Dignity Initiative, funded with $10 million and tasked with transforming how airports across America treated their passengers. Tom Hargrove called Derek personally to confirm the final details. "It's done, Derek. Everything you asked for. The board approved it unanimously. Frankly, they didn't have a choice. Our passenger bookings dropped 11% in the first 2 weeks. The only way to recover is to prove we've changed." Proving it means doing it, Tom, not just signing papers. I know, and I want you to know that Rosa Delgado has already started implementing the new protocols at Hartsfield-Jackson. She's remarkable, Derek. The staff respects her. The passengers love her. She turned your worst experience with our airline into the foundation for our best terminal operation. "That doesn't surprise me at all," Derek said. "She was the best person in that terminal before any of this happened. You just couldn't see it because she was standing behind a counter." 3 months after the incident, Karen Whitfield sat in a coffee shop in Decatur, Georgia, reading a news article on her phone about the William Washington Dignity Initiative. She had been unemployed for 12 weeks. She had applied to 9 jobs. She had been rejected by all of them because her name was still attached to the most viral discrimination video of the year, and no employer wanted to inherit the liability. Her savings were running low. Her mother called every day with a mixture of love and disappointment that Karen found harder to bear than the unemployment itself. Her brother Craig had driven down from Chattanooga twice to sit with her, not to lecture her or fix her, but simply to be present, because that's what family does when someone is falling apart. Karen set down her phone and stared at her coffee. She had spent 3 months replaying that Sunday morning in her head. Every word she had said, every assumption she had made, every moment when she could have stopped, reconsidered, backed down, and chose instead to double down because admitting she was wrong felt more terrifying than destroying her career. She had watched Tyler Brennan's stream once. Just once. She couldn't watch it again because hearing her own voice say, "People like you," and "This isn't Planet Fitness," made her physically ill. She had heard those words come out of her mouth and had not recognized the person saying them, even though it was her face and her voice and her badge and her authority. Her phone buzzed. An email from a name she didn't recognize. Subject line, "Invitation to speak." She opened it. "Ms. Whitfield, my name is Dr. James Porter, and I direct the Center for Workplace Equity at Emory University. I'm reaching out because I believe your experience at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, while painful, offers a unique and valuable perspective on how unconscious bias manifests in positions of authority. I'm developing a training program for airport and airline employees, and I would like to invite you to participate, not as a villain in someone else's story, but as a person willing to examine what happened and help others understand how it happens. This would be a paid speaking engagement. More importantly, it would be an opportunity to transform your worst moment into something meaningful. If you're interested, please reply. Karen read the email 4 times. Then she closed her phone, pressed it against her forehead, and sat in the coffee shop for 20 minutes without moving. Then she typed 2 words back. I'm interested. Because Karen Whitfield had spent 3 months running from what she did, and she had finally stopped running. Not because the shame had faded. It hadn't. It never would completely. But because she realized that carrying the shame in silence was just another form of the same cowardice that had made her look at a black man in running shorts and decide he didn't deserve the same respect as everyone else. She had been wrong. She had to say it out loud. She had to say it to rooms full of people who needed to hear it from someone who had lived it. And she had to keep saying it until the words, "I was wrong," stopped feeling like a confession and started feeling like a foundation. 6 months after the incident, Derek Washington walked through the doors of Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport wearing a tailored Navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He was there for a speaking engagement at the airport's annual Corporate Leadership Conference, and he had specifically requested that the event be held in the premium terminal at Gate C-12. The terminal had been renamed. A brass plaque mounted near the entrance read, "The Dignity Lounge," dedicated to the belief that every passenger deserves respect, regardless of appearance, attire, or assumption. Named in honor of the William Washington Dignity Initiative. Rosa Delgado was waiting for him at the entrance. She wore a new uniform with a customer service manager badge, and her posture carried the quiet authority of someone who had earned her position through the hardest possible audition. "Mr. Washington," she said, and her smile held 6 months of gratitude and growth and the kind of pride that comes from turning the worst day of your career into the foundation of your best work. "Rosa," Derek said. He shook her hand and then, on impulse, pulled her into a brief hug. "How's the terminal?" "Different," she said. "Better. We retrained every employee. We have passenger advocates on every shift. And we put your father's name on the wall." She pointed to the plaque. "Every new hire reads it on their first day. Every employee sees it when they clock in." Derek walked to the plaque and touched his father's name with his fingertips. William Washington, the man with the delivery truck. The man who had never owned a private jet or an $800 million portfolio or a house in Martha's Vineyard. The man who had simply believed with every fiber of his being that hard work and dignity were the same thing. "Dad," Derek whispered, "they put your name on the wall." Rosa stood behind him and said nothing, because some moments belong only to the people living them. Derek composed himself, turned, and walked to the podium that had been set up near Gate C-12, the same gate where his jet had landed, the same gate where Karen Whitfield had told him he didn't belong, the same gate where Rosa Delgado had said, "Then fire me," and changed the course of her life. 300 people filled the terminal: airport executives, airline CEOs, federal aviation officials, civil rights leaders, media. And in the back row, Tyler Brennan, now an intern at Washington Global Logistics, with his phone in his hand, ready to record. Always ready to record. Derek gripped the podium and looked out at the crowd. 6 months ago, I sat in a chair right there, he said, pointing to the spot. I had just finished running a marathon. I was tired. I was sweaty. I was wearing shorts and running shoes and carrying a gym bag. And a woman walked up to me and told me I didn't belong here. He paused. She was wrong about me. But here's what keeps me up at night. She wasn't unusual. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't the worst person in this airport. She was a person who had been given authority without accountability, assumptions without examination, and power without empathy. And in the absence of those things, she did what people have always done. She looked at someone who didn't match her expectations and decided he was a threat. He looked directly at the camera Tyler was holding. My father drove a delivery truck for 15 years before anyone took him seriously as a businessman. He walked into banks wearing work boots and was told to use the service entrance. He bid on contracts and was laughed out of offices. He built a $3.2 billion company, and on the day he died, he told me the thing he was most proud of wasn't the money or the contracts or the buildings with his name on them. He told me he was most proud of the fact that he never once let anyone else decide what he was worth. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's marathon medal. Not his own, his father's. William Washington had run the Atlanta Marathon in 2003 at the age of 58 in 4 hours and 41 minutes. The medal was scratched and worn. The ribbon was faded, but Derek carried it everywhere. He held it up. My father ran his marathon in work boots because he couldn't afford running shoes. He finished dead last in his age group. And he said it was the greatest day of his life because he proved that the only person who gets to decide when you quit is you. Derek set the medal on the podium. I didn't sit in that chair 6 months ago because I wanted to teach anyone a lesson. I sat there because it was my seat, and I had a right to it. But what happened in this terminal became something bigger than one man's bad Sunday. It became a mirror, and what we saw in that mirror made a lot of people uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort is where change begins. He stepped back from the podium. Dignity is not negotiable. Respect is not conditional. And the next time someone walks into a space you control and doesn't look like what you expected, remember this. You don't know their story. You don't know their name. You don't know what they've built or what they've survived or what medal they're carrying around their neck. All you know is that they're standing in front of you, and that should be enough. The terminal erupted. 300 people on their feet. Tyler Brennan recording through tears. Rosa Delgado applauding with both hands above her head. And somewhere in the crowd, Dr. Sandra Ellis, who had flown down from New York specifically for this moment, standing and clapping, and finally, after 6 months, forgiving herself for those 30 minutes. Derek Washington picked up his father's medal, put it back in his pocket, and walked out of the terminal. He didn't take the jet this time. He walked through the regular terminal, past the general seating, past the fast food restaurants and the gift shops, and the charging stations where ordinary people waited for ordinary flights. He walked among them because he was one of them. He had always been one of them. The jet and the company and the $800 million didn't change that. Nothing ever would. Outside, the Atlanta sun was warm. Derek stopped on the curb and pulled out his phone. One new message from Robert Chen. Watched your speech on the live stream. William is smiling, Derek. Wherever he is, he's smiling. Derek looked up at the sky. Somewhere above Atlanta, a plane was climbing. Somewhere below Atlanta, a man's name was mounted on a wall. And somewhere in between, in the space where memory meets momentum, a father's voice whispered what it had always whispered, through delivery trucks and loading docks and boardrooms and marathon finish lines, and one quiet Sunday in a premium terminal. You belong everywhere you stand, son. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. Dignity is not determined by dress codes or bank accounts or job titles. The person you dismiss today might be the person who changes your tomorrow. Not through revenge, through truth. And truth, once spoken, doesn't stop moving until it reaches every corner that needs its light. That is the end of this story, but it is not the end of the conversation. Because somewhere, right now, in an airport or a restaurant or an office or a store, someone is being told they don't belong. And the question is not whether it's happening. The question is what you're going to do about it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and remember that courage doesn't always look like a man with a private jet. Sometimes courage looks like a woman behind a counter saying, "Then fire me." Sometimes courage looks like a 19-year-old pressing record. Sometimes courage looks like a doctor standing up after 30 minutes of silence. And sometimes courage looks like a man in running shorts who simply refused to move.